Today, while I'm only asking you to look at a few brief verses at the end of Colossians chapter 3, verses 23 to 25, I'd always encourage you to read Colossians chapter 3 because verses 1 to 17 especially are such a wonderful summary of what we're called to do and how we're called to live. And it's what Dallas Willard liked to describe as the path to genuine liberation in life is living out Colossians 3. And at the end of that chapter, and this part actually comes in the context of talking about the relationship between slaves and masters, which, of course, slavery was a part of first century culture in that part of the world. But it says, whatever your task, and we can hear this speaking to all of us, put yourselves into it as done for the Lord and not for your masters. And again, that initial thought of we don't have to think about masters, but whatever you're doing, put yourselves into it as done for the Lord, since you know that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You serve the Lord Christ. For the wrongdoer will be paid back for whatever wrong has been done, and there is no partiality. And again, as we're talking about God being impartial this week, that statement, that phrase ends the third chapter of Colossians, and it comes after brief words about wives and husbands and children and parents and fathers and children and slaves and masters. And the bottom line is we want to do whatever we do as if we're doing it to Jesus himself, and we want to remember God is not going to show partiality. It doesn't matter if we're the person with the most power and authority in the household, which at that time would have been the husband and father. It doesn't matter if you're at the highest position or if you're even in the position of a slave. We're all called to do what we do wholeheartedly as if we're doing it for Jesus himself. And so when you look back at all of Colossians chapter 3 and its whole discussion about putting to death the things in us that are earthly. These are the things we're to get rid of. Fornication, impurity, evil desire, greed, which is idolatry. And on account of these, the wrath of God is coming on those who are disobedient. So we're to think of, people who practice these sorts of things, they are going to face the judgment and the wrath of God. And Paul says this is how some of you all were living, and you've got to get rid of all such things. Anger, wrath, malice, slander, abusive language. These are, do not lie to one another. These are all behaviors that have no place in the life of a Christian, right? And instead, we are to clothe ourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, to bear with one another, forgive each other, clothe yourselves with love, let the peace of Christ rule. These are the things that God is looking for in our lives, and that's what we all want to cultivate. Avoid what Colossians 3 says to avoid. Practice what it says to practice.